You got something in here you don't want me to see?
You're searching without consent. State your legal reason on camera.
All right. You're being detained.
Detained for what? You haven't stated a reason.
Shut up and turn around. Hands behind your back.
A traffic officer thought he could pull over a black man in a silver Mercedes, treat him like a criminal, search his car without consent, and then force an arrest when nothing turned up. What that officer didn't know was that the driver he was pushing around was an active senior deputy U.S. Marshal, and the entire stop was being recorded on body cam in a way that would be impossible to explain later. At this moment, we want to tell you that we're incredibly grateful you chose to spend your time with us today. Your support keeps this channel alive and thriving. Now tell us where you're watching from, your state or country in the comments. And if you like stories where people stay calm, keep their rights clear, and bad behavior gets real consequences, hit like and subscribe. Here's how it started. Malcolm Reed was driving home in a silver Mercedes. He was going the speed limit, staying in his lane, and using signals. It was early evening with steady traffic. The road ran past a shopping plaza and restaurants. A patrol car got behind him and stayed there for longer than normal. Malcolm noticed it but kept driving normally. He didn't speed up, slow down, or change lanes suddenly. Then the patrol car activated its lights. Malcolm signaled and pulled over to a safe spot on the shoulder. He shut off the engine, rolled the driver's window down, and kept both hands visible on the steering wheel. Officer Tyler Grady walked up to the driver's side. He did not clearly state why Malcolm was being stopped. He immediately focused on the vehicle and Malcolm's identity. He asked for license and registration in a hostile tone. Malcolm provided his license and registration. He asked for the reason for the stop. Grady did not give a clear reason. He kept asking questions about the Mercedes, including who it belonged to and how Malcolm got it. His questions implied he believed the car was stolen or that Malcolm was involved in something illegal. Malcolm stayed calm and kept his responses limited to what was required. He asked again for the reason for the stop. Grady escalated. He ordered Malcolm to step out of the vehicle. Malcolm complied. He exited slowly and kept his hands visible. He stood where Grady directed him. Grady immediately performed a pat-down. It was rough and aggressive. Malcolm did not resist. He stayed still and kept his voice controlled. Malcolm stated clearly that he did not consent to any search of the vehicle. Grady ignored that statement. He positioned Malcolm away from the Mercedes and moved towards the vehicle as if he was going to search anyway. Malcolm repeated that he did not consent. Grady proceeded as if the refusal didn't matter and prepared to search the car. Grady searched the Mercedes anyway, even after Malcolm clearly stated he did not consent. He started in the front cabin, moving fast, like he wanted it to look routine. He opened the center console and looked through it. He checked the glove compartment. He moved items around and looked into smaller compartments, not because he had a specific safety concern, but because he was trying to find something, anything, that would justify the way he had been speaking to Malcolm since the first seconds of the stop. Malcolm stayed where Grady placed him, several steps away from the vehicle, positioned so he couldn't interfere. Malcolm kept his hands visible and kept his posture calm. He did not move toward the car. He didn't raise his voice. He repeated one key point clearly so the camera would catch it. He did not consent to a search. Grady ignored that and kept going. He leaned into the passenger side area and checked places that didn't match any claimed reason for the stop. He looked under the front seats. He checked door pockets. He didn't find anything. And instead of stopping, he expanded the search. He opened the rear doors and searched the back seat area. He lifted floor mats and checked underneath. He looked between seat cushions. It wasn't a quick look for a weapon within reach. It was a search meant to produce a result. While he did it, Grady kept talking, trying to build a story out loud. He described Malcolm as nervous and not answering simple questions, even though Malcolm's behavior was controlled and his answers were basic. Grady kept implying there were signs without naming what they were. That's a common move when there's no real basis. Keep saying there's something, but never commit to a specific fact that can be disproven. Malcolm did not argue back and forth. He didn't get pulled into a debate. He stayed focused on clear, short statements. His lack of consent, his cooperation with commands, and his request for the reason for the stop. Grady still found nothing. No contraband, no weapon, no stolen property indicators, no baggies, no smell source, no open containers, no tools or items that could be claimed as burglary tools. Nothing. At that point, Grady had two options: end the stop and walk away, or double down and try to regain control. He doubled down. He shut the door and turned back toward Malcolm, changing his tone from searching to accusing. He told Malcolm he was being detained. Malcolm asked for the reason. Grady did not provide a clear reason. He circled back to the same vague insinuations he'd used from the beginning, suspicion based on nothing concrete. Malcolm remained calm and asked again for the reason for the stop. He also stated again that he did not consent to the search that had just happened. Grady reacted like Malcolm's calmness was disrespect. That's when Grady escalated to physical control. He stepped into Malcolm's space, grabbed his arm, and moved to apply handcuffs. Malcolm did not pull away. He did not jerk. He did not tense up and give Grady a reason to claim resistance. He kept his hands positioned where Grady directed and allowed the cuffs to go on. But Malcolm made sure the record stayed clear. He said Grady was making a mistake and that his identity would be confirmed once his information was properly run. Grady acted like that didn't matter. He tightened the cuffs and continued treating it like a justified arrest. He walked Malcolm toward the patrol car, positioning him near the rear passenger side like he was about to place him inside. People were driving by. Some slowed down. A couple of heads turned from the sidewalk near the plaza entrance. Not a crowd, but enough visibility to make it humiliating and to make Grady feel like he had an audience. Then Grady finally did what he should have done at the start. He went to verify Malcolm's identity through dispatch. He radioed in Malcolm's name and information. His voice sounded confident, like he expected the system to back him up. Dispatch responded normally at first, then asked him to repeat the name and date of birth. Grady repeated it. There was a pause. Dispatch came back with a different tone, more formal, more careful. They informed him that Malcolm Reed returned as active law enforcement at the federal level, and that the record required additional confirmation. They instructed Grady to stand by. Grady tried to keep control of the scene, but the shift had already happened. He glanced at Malcolm, then away, as if he was recalculating. He started speaking faster on the radio, asking follow-up questions that sounded less like policing and more like damage control. Dispatch escalated it to a supervisor. Grady attempted to change his approach mid-stop. His posture softened slightly. His voice lowered. He stopped acting like Malcolm was a criminal suspect and started acting like this might become a problem for him personally. Malcolm didn't respond to the switch. He didn't argue. He didn't accept any "let's calm down" tone as if they were both equally responsible for what just happened. He stayed calm because he understood what mattered now: the footage, the sequence, and the lack of legal basis. Within minutes, Sergeant Dana Klein arrived. She didn't walk up like she was coming to support Grady emotionally. She walked up like she was there to take control of a situation that had already gone off track. She looked at Malcolm's cuffs first. Then she looked at Grady. Then she looked at the Mercedes. She asked Grady for the reason for the stop. Not the long version, not the opinion version, the actual reason. Grady tried to explain. It came out unclear and inconsistent. He referenced vague suspicion and tried to justify the search after the fact. Klein didn't argue with him on the shoulder. She did what competent supervisors do when they know something is wrong. She separated the officer from the driver and de-escalated immediately. She spoke directly to Malcolm in a professional tone and confirmed his identity through procedure. She had Malcolm uncuffed. She returned his license and registration. She kept the body cams running and made sure the stop ended without further escalation. Grady stood back, visibly frustrated, but he didn't have leverage anymore. The reason he didn't have leverage wasn't Malcolm's job title. It was the fact that Grady had created a stop with no solid justification, performed a search after non-consent, and then tried to turn the situation into an arrest when the search came up empty. Before Malcolm left, he made one clean statement to Klein that mattered. He didn't threaten. He didn't raise his voice. He made it clear that the footage would speak for itself and that the stop would be addressed through proper channels. Malcolm left the scene without raising his voice and without making it personal. He drove off, parked in a well-lit lot a few minutes away, and documented what mattered while it was fresh: the location, the approximate time, the sequence of events, and the key actions. No reason stated for the stop, rough pat-down, search after non-consent, cuffs with no evidence, and the name run that changed everything. He did not post online. He did not call friends to vent. He handled it like someone trained to build clean records. That night, Malcolm notified the right people through official channels. He reported that a local officer conducted an unlawful stop and search and attempted a baseless arrest while he was off duty. He included the officer's name and badge number, the patrol unit number if remembered, and the supervisor's name who responded. By the next morning, the department was already reacting. Because the moment a supervisor shows up to a stop involving an active federal law enforcement officer, the paperwork stops being optional. The stop gets logged, the body cam becomes evidence, and people above the patrol level start asking questions they can't ignore. Sergeant Dana Klein filed her own incident report. She included the basics. She responded to a traffic stop, verified the driver's identity, and terminated the detention. But she also had to account for why the stop escalated to cuffs and a search. That meant she had to document what Grady claimed and what he could actually support. And that's where Grady's story started collapsing. Grady wrote his version like most officers do when they know a review is coming. He tried to justify the stop with vague language. He described Malcolm as suspicious and implied there were indicators. He wrote that he felt officer safety concerns and suggested the search was necessary, but the body cam footage didn't match the report. A report can claim nervous behavior. The camera shows calm, compliant behavior. A report can claim refused to cooperate. The camera shows a driver providing license and registration and following commands. A report can claim probable cause. The camera shows no clear reason stated before the search, and a clear non-consent statement ignored. That gap is what turns a complaint into a case. Within days, Internal Affairs opened a formal investigation. They requested all recordings: Grady's body cam, Klein's body cam, any dash camera, and dispatch audio. They also pulled the CAD log to see the timeline, when the stop began, when the name was run, and exactly when the supervisor was called. They interviewed Grady first. That's standard. Give the officer a chance to explain before confronting him with the footage. Grady tried to keep his explanation broad. He said he believed the vehicle might be stolen. He said Malcolm's questions felt combative. He said he searched for safety reasons. He said the cuffs were to secure the scene. But IA doesn't build cases on feelings. They build them on policy and sequence. They asked him the simplest question: what traffic violation did he observe that justified the stop? Grady didn't have a clean answer. Then they asked the next one: what specific legal basis allowed him to search after the driver clearly stated he didn't consent? Grady tried to talk around it. Then they asked the one that ended his room to maneuver: why did he try to arrest when the search found nothing? Grady had no good answer for that because the video showed it was about control, not evidence. At the same time, Malcolm filed a civil rights complaint through the process that actually moves things: written statement, request for preservation of evidence, and a formal demand that the department retain all body cam and dispatch audio. He wasn't asking them to look into it. He was putting them on notice. He also retained counsel. The attorney didn't come in yelling. She came in methodical. She requested footage. She requested the officers stop history. She requested training records. She asked for prior complaints. She asked whether Grady had a pattern of stops that started as no reason stated and ended in searches. That's when the city's legal department got involved. Because this wasn't only a personnel problem, it was a liability problem. An unlawful stop, unlawful search, and false arrest exposure are exactly the kind of claims that cost departments real money, especially when video makes the timeline obvious. A few weeks later, the body cam footage was reviewed at a higher level. Not just IA, command staff, city attorneys, risk management, and the department could see it clearly. Grady's approach was wrong from the beginning. He escalated without facts. He ignored a clear statement of non-consent. He searched anyway. He found nothing. Then he tried to arrest anyway. That last part mattered the most. Searching with no basis is serious. Trying to arrest after the search fails is worse, because it shows the goal wasn't safety or investigation, it was authority. Grady was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. His gun and badge were turned in. His patrol access was cut. His shifts were covered. It was quiet, but everyone in the building knew why. Then, the department tried the predictable internal move. Contain it. They reached out through official channels and floated the idea of resolving the situation quickly. Not an apology on the record. Not an admission of wrongdoing. More like an attempt to make it go away before it became public and before a lawsuit forced disclosures. Malcolm didn't take that route. He didn't want a quiet conversation. He wanted the record corrected and the behavior addressed. He understood what happens when incidents like this get handled quietly. The officer learns nothing. The department changes nothing. And the next driver doesn't have the same protection or documentation. So the case moved forward. A formal notice of claim was filed. The allegations were clear. Unlawful stop, unlawful search, unlawful detention, false arrest attempt, and excessive force during the pat-down and handcuffing. It wasn't written with dramatic language. It was written with timestamps. And that's what made it dangerous for the city, because the facts weren't complicated. The video made them simple. The city couldn't treat this like a normal complaint anymore. Malcolm's attorney had the body cam footage, the dispatch audio, and the supervisor response in writing. The timeline was clear. No stated reason for the stop. Immediate criminal assumptions, a rough pat-down, a search after Malcolm said he didn't consent, then cuffs and an arrest attempt after the search produced nothing. That combination forced the city into decision mode. They opened formal settlement discussions, while internal affairs finished their work. That's common in cases like this, because the city doesn't want a jury watching body cam footage that makes the officer look reckless and the department look careless. Even if the city thinks it can defend parts of it, the risk is too high when the footage is straightforward. Internal Affairs completed its investigation and sustained multiple violations against Grady. The department didn't frame it as one mistake. They framed it as a pattern of bad judgment during a single encounter, initiating a stop without a clear, documented reason, escalating without evidence, conducting a search without valid consent or a legal exception, and applying cuffs without probable cause. That last point is what ended him. Because it wasn't just a bad stop. It was an attempted false arrest on camera. Grady was terminated. His termination letter cited policy violations related to traffic stops, search procedures, and arrest standards. He tried to appeal through the usual channels, but the body cam removed his ability to argue misunderstanding. The footage showed the sequence too clearly, and then came the certification issue. When an officer is fired for misconduct tied to unlawful actions, it doesn't just affect that department. It affects whether they can be hired anywhere else. Grady's file followed him. He could apply elsewhere, but departments that did their homework would see the same thing. He escalated a stop based on assumptions, then tried to arrest when he couldn't justify it. His law enforcement future collapsed fast. On the civil side, the case moved forward with pressure on the city. Malcolm's attorney filed in federal court under civil rights claims, including unlawful stop, unlawful search, unlawful detention, and false arrest. The filing was written like the video, clean and chronological. The city settled. They did it without admitting liability, because cities almost always try to avoid that language. But the settlement included real money, and it included non-monetary terms that mattered more long-term. The department agreed to changes tied directly to what happened to Malcolm. Supervisors required to respond sooner when a stop escalates to a search or cuffs without clear cause. Documented articulation required for traffic stops and searches, body cam compliance and regular audits, refresher training on consent searches and detention standards, and review of officers with repeated complaints involving stops that escalate without clear reasons. The department also had to preserve and produce footage faster under tighter rules, so footage couldn't disappear through delay or sloppy handling. Malcolm didn't celebrate publicly. He didn't do interviews to go viral. He didn't make it about status. He focused on the point that mattered. This happened because an officer decided his assumptions were enough to treat someone like a suspect. And Malcolm knew the only reason it didn't end worse is because he stayed calm, complied with lawful commands, and kept the record clear while the camera recorded the rest. Weeks later, Malcolm returned to normal life. Same kind of driving, same calm routine. But he also knew something important had shifted. The department had to put in writing what they were willing to tolerate. And Grady became an example inside that agency, not a hero, not a bad luck story, a warning. Because the system can ignore complaints when there's no proof. It can argue when there's no video. But when an officer's own camera shows an unlawful stop turning into a search, and then an arrest attempt with no cause, the excuses don't hold. So here's the takeaway for anyone watching. If you're ever in a situation like this, staying calm isn't weakness. It keeps you safe and keeps the story clear. Short statements matter. Consent matters. Asking for the reason matters. And cameras, body cams, dash cams, phones, business cameras, change outcomes because they stop people from rewriting what happened later. Now I want to ask you, if you were Malcolm, would you have stayed as calm as he did? Or would you have pushed back harder in the moment? And have you ever had a routine stop turn into something that felt personal? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share the story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, where people hold their ground and accountability catches up, make sure you like and subscribe.